for good questions and good comments. So if you have a good question or a good comment, there will be a prize.
What about for bad ones?
No.
What are the prizes?
So like I said, this talks about you, so I want you guys' feedback. Bug bounties are an interesting way that they're kind of shifting some of the security testing approach. And so it's interesting to talk to people that are in the security field about what they think, right? All right, so first a quick poll to understand who's here. Right, so who here is a builder? They write software, right? Okay, maybe 2 people, 3, a couple, right? Good. So who here is a breaker? You're a pen tester, you do code audits, all right, a handful. What about defenders? People doing security, protecting your, okay. It's a good mix of the breaker and defender, which is perfect. All right, so my view is that bug bounty programs are revolutionizing how companies go about securing themselves, right? It's a major shift in the approach to security, and it's just completely different, right? This crowdsourced model, you take all these people anywhere on the internet, hack in, if you find something you pay, which is totally different than we're going to hire Ernst & Young or KPMG, or one of these other firms to come in and do a risk assessment, right, for X amount of money. Does anyone believe that? You believe it?
I do.
Okay. So I think traditional security testing is dead. So, right? Why are you going to spend this money to have one person for a week for $20,000 or whatever it is hack into a website and give you a report? I mean, you can have to pay that money and get tons of people to do it, right? Because so many more results, right?
Because I'm required by compliance.
It's a good answer. Correct. You win! Prize! All right. Come on down. You guys come down here. The first prize. And your prize is for compliance. I like that. That's great. So I just got something new today. Talk dirty to me.
Welcome, talk further.
That's right.
All right, here you go, sir. And as you're meeting your compliance requirements, you will need many more of those. Alright, so here's my view. Automated tools don't work. They're not going to find everything a pen test does, manual testing. Hopefully you guys all agree with that at this point. You should know that it only gets you so far. Waterfall security is not agile coming in before launch to do a security assessment or a pen test is crap. It doesn't work, it's very expensive. It blows release dates, customers, perception of when products are coming out. I was a product manager for a while, and the last tick before you launch is a security test. It just doesn't work, right? And I think very few people have really integrated security into the agile process. There's a massive shortage of talent. Who here is hiring security people? Anyone? Everybody. Everybody, literally everyone. Can you find anyone? No, they're really hard to find good security people, right?
That's due to the alphabet soup.
What's that?
That's due to the alphabet soup bureaucracy.
That's due to the. What do you mean?
The companies are fighting for so much different requirements that have come up hiring managers don't even really understand what they're hiring for.
Well, I agree this would come with HR, but I mean, as a hiring manager, Nick, you've hired people before for security jobs. You interview them, you understand the alphabet soup, and you know who's good and not. It's still hard to find people. It is, yeah. So I think that might be true, like on the first pass, and you get a bunch of bullshit people, and it's like, oh, you have a CISSP? That sounds great. Right? Whatever the certified hacker thing is, certified ethical hacker, yeah. So like, oh, that's sweet, right? You have a comment?
Yes.
You're looking for a second shot.
Hell yeah.
Right?
So one of the issues, given the shortage of talent, is it's particularly problematic on the client side. Why? Because the vendor side can spread the cost of that talent across multiple projects and clients, right? So this is where the real problem is. And it gets even worse because
for a vendor, bring someone in internally to do it versus someone who's going to be consulting to a large number of clients.
no, I'm saying client side, customer side versus vendor side.
Okay.
So the value that a vendor can extract from talent is much greater than the client can generally afford to pay for internally. And what makes it even worse is Now the client doesn't have qualified personnel to even evaluate properly the vendor offerings.
This is true. So you agree with my points, 1 through 4. It's also cost prohibitive. I don't know what the cost of a security person is these days, but pretty damn high, right? I suspect that they raised the rates in the bar here because they know all you hackers are really rich, right? The starting level for people with security is not low, right? I heard my friend told me the other day that a hourly rate for a developer is $150 an hour. I was like, wow, that is crazy. Security is obviously, or most of the time, is more expensive than that. And so it's very expensive, right? Casey, do you agree with my points? Perfect. All right, so here's what bug bounty is, right? You've got all these problems in this program, or how kind of security is working now. So basically, anyone in the world can hack into this website, this network, whatever it is, and if you find bugs, you report them, keep them to yourself, report them to the company, and then the company will validate them and then pay you for that issue. All right? So it's kind of the crowdsourced model of security testing. Make sense? All right? So here it is, yeah. Responsible disclosure, meaning you're not going to leak it all over the place, plus the crowdsource, anyone can do it, and then you pay these people. So here's kind of the timeline, from what I can tell, of when these programs started. iDefense was buying bugs a long time ago, right? As far as I can tell, they were the first. Other notable ones is Mozilla Zero Day Initiative. I love the No More Free Bugs, if you guys remember that, with Dino, those guys. Chrome and Google started, Facebook, Barracuda, PayPal, Etsy, Yandex, which is like the Russian Google, I guess. Right? So here's the question. Are there any bug reporters in here? Has anyone submitted a bug? You have? Yes. You guys in the back, what did you submit? Can you talk about it?
Yandex. They're awful web security bugs. There's tons of them inside.
Yandex? You hacked Yandex?
They're awful.
What did you do? What was the best vuln you had?
We had pretty much everything. CY, cross-site scripting, file
All right, here, come on. You guys get a shot for that. That's good. What about you? What did you submit?
So it wasn't through a bounty program, it never happened.
Okay.
It was actually for F5, and they had a problem with how the firmware.
They don't have a bug bounty program?
They had a problem with how the firmware interacted with the ASIC and their load balancers.
Okay. I'll take that one on the side of that. Good work, guys. And what they do? It was a responsible disclosure to the company, not a bug bounty.
I've used their products. I mean, I've found other bugs that I've used other vendors.
Okay.
And not for bounties, it's just, I want the product fixed.
Sure, yeah. You use it or yeah. Maybe. That's not good enough. It's not a bug bounty program. That's not in the rules of the program for drinking. What about you? What was your bug? What's the best? Give me the best.
Well, it's currently posting Facebook fixed with the company.
All right, tell us how you do that.
I haven't it. If I tell you,
They won't pay you? What do you think you're going to get paid for that? Do you mind sharing, or should we have a vote on what we think you should get
it's
paid?
only previously been half, it's like a stage, one half security,
Okay.
so half support for our product. So I will get that. Maybe it's second out, man.
That's good. All right, let's get buying drinks tonight. $1,000. All right, so you're definitely buying drinks tonight. So let's talk about the bug bounty programs themselves. So I worked internally at a bug bounty program for a large company, and I saw a couple different things when I was there. It was really interesting to see kind of the internal side of how you handle all these bugs. Right? So here are the keys to running a bug bounty program. I think there are 5 simple rules to do this way. Okay? First one is the bug payouts, right? So remote code execution obviously has the biggest payout, and then SQL injection, and it kind of goes down from there, right? So the payouts are relative to how hard it is to find the bug, what's the impact of that bug, right? Makes sense. Not all bugs are equal, right? So if you find a bug on one site, that maybe not the main Google site, it's maybe some other Google site, you're going to get paid less for that. That makes sense from a risk perspective from the company. That's okay, right? they all generally have a disclosure policy where you're not allowed to disclose the bug, like you can't talk about it until it's been fixed, right? And once it's fixed, you can talk about it, right? You can blog about it, whatever, right? So this is pretty standard across them. Also, what I think is the most interesting, first in, best dressed. That's how Google puts it. So if you have the first bug, and I think this is a little subjective, right? Because first in, best dressed, if two come in at the same time for the same bug, but one has like a better working proof of concept, or maybe has a better, whatever, right? The people, there's a little subjective on who wins, right? What does that mean? It's up to the people running the program to decide what matters, right? So that's kind of interesting when you think about submitting these bugs and how you want to present them, right? Also, well-defined targets and scope. So most of these programs that have bug bounties are saying, okay, this domain, these domains are in, anything else is not. For Google and PayPal, I think, and probably the other ones are, they say new acquisitions, if we buy a company, they're out of the program for 6 months because they probably, which is kind of counterintuitive because that means maybe they didn't do a good security assessment prior to buying the company you're in, and they're generally buying technology companies. But those are generally excluded, right? So then that raises an interesting question. So I was an internal for a bug bounty program, and a lot of bugs got submitted that were out of scope. Do you pay for those?
We do.
Who?
Mozilla.
Why?
Because if you submit a really, really good bug, it's going in our stuff, it's worth paying out for it, even if it's not on our bug bounty list, we pay for it.
All right, shout to Mozilla.
Well,
All right, come on, winner. I like that. So I think that's a
So
good
we have a
idea.
list of sites that we say these are within our bug bounty. Even if you find a site that's not on that list and the bug is bad enough and awesome enough to warrant the bounty, people will still pay.
All right, no scope. Anything you want, Mozilla. It's in. There you go. I like this for pen testing rules of engagement, right?
So
We bend the rules for awesome bugs. We actually pay bounty bugs on third-party open source projects that we use that don't have their own bounty program if the bug is severe and squirrely.
That is crazy.
So when will Mozilla support TLS 1.2?
All right.
It's already fixed the
Submit a bug,
bug.
submit a bug, right? You can't keep that shot glass either. What do you guys think? You shook your head no. You don't think you should pay for things out of scope? Yeah.
So you mean me?
Both of you guys. Go ahead. Should you? I don't know. You say yes, you pay Mozilla, and I respect that.
It depends.
Does anyone else? Okay.
Well, if it's a really, really good bug,
You'll pay.
if you're not going to pay, then what you're telling people is, don't bring this stuff to me, go somewhere else.
CDI. You agree? CDI, all right.
Yeah, we take out anything that's gonna have, like, our
And where do you work?
the cars that don't.
Okay, they have a bug bounty program. Is there a scope?
So we list a bunch of domains, anything we own. If we have a number of sites that are
Okay.
popular enough, but, yeah, our core sites are out there.
You're gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a-
Our stuff basically goes through committee, so we nominate the bugs, and if the committee says this area, we're also nominating this stuff, and this is remains, pay.
How long does that committee process take?
It depends on the bug and how hairy it is. So
Sure.
what usually happens is as soon as the bug comes in from the third party, we nominate it. And then a developer has to go look at it and confirm the severity rating. And then a patch has to be proposed. Once a patch is proposed and accepted, then the bounty committee goes, okay, now we gotta figure out how much to pay on it, plus the t-shirt. It's like that.
So, I mean, what's the average? Is that 2 weeks? Is that 2 months? Is that 2
We had
years?
some bugs be as short as a day and some bugs be as long as a year.
And the developer decides the risk?
The developer along with the security team.
The committee.
Yeah, there's a meeting of the minds to figure out this.
Got it, cool. Yeah, I'm so glad there's so many good representatives of bug bounty. This is awesome. All right, so those are the 5 rules. There's also 5 major benefits that I see from a business perspective for running these programs, right? The first one is continuous testing, right? You're constantly pushing out code, it's constantly being tested. It's not a snapshot of time like give me my annual PCI pen test or whatever, right? These guys are just always testing, which is awesome. right? And there's huge benefits for that. It's also hugely disruptive, right? Because you're constantly like, well, what did they just find? Like, oh my God, we need to fix this, right? I mean, literally, these programs are insane. So, but continuous testing is awesome, right? And it kind of brings you into the agile mentality of you're going to constantly be doing security testing as well as development and releasing code and things like that, rather than the snapshot in time, which I think is awesome. Also, I think there's a marketing aspect to it, right? They're like, yeah, look at us, we'll take bugs from anyone, we're so secure, we don't care, like, just tell us what the problems are, right? Do you agree? Marketing aspect of that?
It's definitely beneficial.
Okay. I also am a firm believer when I know for a fact, from being in pen tester for a long time, that when I test something and someone else tests something, they look at things differently than I do. They use different tools. I write my own tools, maybe they write their own, right? Do they spend more time on this one IP and this one service than I do, right? You're going to get different levels of tests. I don't care what anyone tells you from different people doing a test. Having the crowd of everyone testing your stuff, you're going to get from different countries, from different hacking groups, you're going to get this blend of all these different techniques, people's skill level and knowledge. And I'll give a very specific example later on of where this comes out. So you get this massive benefit of, I mean, when I was working on this program, we would see every scanner possible, probably, stolen versions of all the major web app scanners running, definitely stolen. Some of them probably were legit, but we got everything, right? And a major company probably isn't going to pay for all of those different things, maybe one or two, but you get that diversity, right, which adds a lot. You have to pay for results. This is my favorite part from a company. It's like, you're not paying for testing. You can hire a company that can do a test, and you get a report. Maybe there's nothing in there. It's like, looks good. We just paid 20 grand for that test, 50 grand, whatever, right? Not here. You only pay for actual results, right? That's beautiful. Yeah.
So, and this is, I think it's an interesting question. So assuming that your security team, your web ops folks, whatever, are paying attention, do you pay for results if you've already seen anomalies, not necessarily figured out the bug, but you've seen anomalies that you're looking into, and then someone submits, and you go, aha, we're already looking at this, we haven't figured out what was going on. Right?
I would. Because now that team can immediately stop doing all the investigation, and you're paying for this outsourced team or person that found that bug. I mean, I don't know. I think you could go both ways, but the fact is, if you're looking at something that looks weird, and someone's like, "Here's the problem," I would pay them.
But they were the ones causing the problem.
Yeah, I mean,
That's not always the case. There are instances where we've had bounty reporter report the bug, and then we use the data to go back and look at the logs and find out if anybody actually used it to exploit that.
Okay.
yeah, totally, right? So I love the idea you only pay for results. From a company's perspective, that's great. You have continuous testing, and you're only paying for valid results. You're not paying for testing here and there, right? I mean, what does it cost to have a team of 40 international testers constantly just test everything you have? Like, you hire them for a standard contract. I don't know what that costs. It's probably pretty expensive versus only paying for the results, right? So what do you guys think? Bug bounty programs, are they more secure? Yes? Raise your hand if you think yes.
More secure than what?
Then companies that don't run bug bounty programs.
It depends.
Wow. Wait, hold on. If you think that a company that runs a bug bounty program is more secure than one that doesn't, raise your hand.
It depends.
Everyone's like, that's like 50-50. Wow, interesting.
I would say yes, because at least you know that you're looking at security.
They care us, yep, what about you?
I mean, I think if you have like a reasonably complex program like Firefox, for example, then you should assume that there's essentially an endless amount of vulnerabilities in there. It's constantly changing, you can't catch them all. So the bug bounty is less about catching specific bugs and more with what you do with information. So if I see a trend in Firefox for the last year is getting a bunch of vulnerabilities in the JavaScript renderer or something like that, fixing those bugs is great. It's good you're getting rid of the vulnerability, but what's more important is then saying we should re-examine this specific part. So the bug bounty itself is just applying a baseline, and then you can use that to say, oh, we implemented, a new mitigation technique in this area, and we've seen it drastically drop.
So you think that, then you agree with this statement that they.
Only if they use that information. It's less about the bugs being fixed, it's less about the bounty and
All
more
right,
about.
shot for you, are you ready?
Yeah.
I agree with you.
All right.
Good comment.
Yes.
And keep in mind too, the bug bounty programs are only affecting the public websites they have as well. You can have private websites that have elevated privileges of admin or
Cheers to you.
vendor warnings without
That's true, right? I mean, most of them are just, there's one company that has it, like, they do some of the internal network stuff. I mean, most of them that I know of are all just external interface, right?
Right, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying, that, you're not testing everything with the bug bounty program. You're
Right.
going to decide to
Generally, your external is the biggest risk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people, anyone can bang on that, right?
I think on my phone, like looking at Google, Facebook, there's become a lot less than there was out. And I think we will see the change between internal. That's why the attackers are doing it. It's not that they're using state phishing or something that's somehow one off the bat.
So how do you run a bug bounty program for the internal network?
I don't know, but I think it's
Just drop a box in the internal network that everyone can VPN into it.
It sounds crazy.
Might as well host your service in China.
They're all running, I mean, like Facebook and Google are running Linux and stuff like that. Start paying out for Linux bugs. It's what Google does for Chrome OS.
That's what Mozilla does for their open source
That's right.
stuff.
They all do it. I mean, if it's an open source project that you're running your software on, it doesn't matter where it's hosted. You can put out a Linux box and say, guys, look at this. That's fine.
All right.
Internal and external, it's the same thing.
So there's some problems, right? Yeah.
So, we actually have something for internal that's for employees.
Oh, an internal bug bounty program. All right, cool.
It's not money to spread. We call it operations research. What we do is we say to people, okay, for using your internal knowledge, not for stuff that you've done, because we have lots of different teams and moving parts.
If I was a developer and coming that paid for bugs internally, I would write a lot of bugs.
That's why it's not money to shred.
Right, yeah.
And using your internal knowledge, what can you come up
Yeah,
with?
the change in motivation of the employees. Are they motivated now to look for bugs or swag or?
No, it's outside of the normal thing, and it's really more for the props than.
The more my company asks me to do outside of my normal thing, the less I want to do. But that's just me. All right, hold on a sec. So there's 8 potential problems, right, with these programs. Let's talk about this. What about the legal issues? All right, what happens when, I don't know, you get extorted? Like, yeah, I know this bug. I think it's worth 50 grand. What are you going to pay me for? We'll start at 50, right? You've got the lawyers in there. I mean, you tell your lawyer, the general counsel, like, all right, we're going to let every hacker in the world hack into us, and then we're going to pay them if they break in. Like, no lawyer's going to be like, great idea. Hey, that's insane. From a legal perspective, that's crazy, right? No lawyer in their right mind is going to be like, yeah, great, right? Okay. Fixing bugs is really hard. So I was a product manager for several years on a pretty complex system, and it's hard. We would have all these bugs that I'd be like, I don't care about, right? They don't impact like revenue and future releases that bring in new customers and things like that. But then we get this backlog, right? The technical debt, and eventually you've got to address that, and you've got to spend some sprints to kind of like clean that out. But if you're constantly getting these security vulnerabilities, then your team is constantly disrupted and needs to like work together and fix these bugs. A lot of times the more interesting bugs that get paid more and have a bigger impact cross teams, right? It's I'm not talking about like one company that has one website that does one thing. I'm talking about PayPal. I'm talking about Google. I'm talking about Microsoft, right? Big companies have complex systems, right? So this is hard to do. Just if you've ever worked in a big company and there's cross-functional shit that needs to happen, it's hard, right? There's some political aspects you need to work on and things like that, right? What about when you get bugs that are very close, right? All these programs only take the first in, best dressed, right? Remember that? What happens when they're very close, right? is that a different attack vector, or is that a different attack string that they use? Right? Is that, there's 2 injection points, but is it the same actual vulnerable code? Do you pay for both those places that hit that one piece of code, or is that one bug? Is it's actually one place in the code that actually exhibits that, but there are multiple entry points? Right? It gets complicated. It's not very easy to understand. Like, what do you think about that? 2 entry points, 1 single injection point. Is that 2 bugs or 1 bug?
How many patches is it?
1 patch.
It's one bug.
Okay. I think that's the right approach. Okay, language barriers. When I did this, people would write emails that were not in English. They tried to be in English. They were very hard to understand, right? And they're like, hey, look, I hacked this, and here's the result. And it would just be a page. No parameters, no other information, broken English. That's difficult, right? I mean, if you open up a worldwide hacking program, you probably see this, right? I mean, it's like, what the hell are you talking about, right? It's very hard, especially the super hardcore technical guys, sometimes don't write good reports, right? It's just a fact, right? What about false positives, right? So all these people that are like, oh, I saw, this on here. 404, found a 404. Yeah, you're like, I don't care about 404s, right? Or other things that you test, and it's like, no, that's actually not vulnerable. You don't understand how this aspect of web security works, right? That happens all the time. That takes time and money. You've got to look at them, right? And sometimes you can just glance and you're like, no, this is bullshit. But sometimes you've got to spend the time to look at it.
Yeah, I think another thing on top of that is you also have some people arguing that bugs are exploitable and some people arguing that they're not, because there's no, I don't know, depending on the requirements, you have to provide a proof of concept, or otherwise you can just show the actual vulnerability. But like, a quarter of all the like Linux kernel vulnerabilities I see start off with someone saying, "Oh, this is just a DOS. This isn't actually exploitable." And then it takes like a month, and someone comes back, provides actual proof of concept code for the entire time it's been exploitable.
Sure.
But they're just like, "Oh, we're going to put this on the backlogs. It's not ready yet. It's not a priority. It's just a bug. It's not an exploit." So.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for the ability of the internal team to take something that's not quite weaponized and say, oh shit, this actually is huge. It's much bigger than that guy reported. Now, do you pay that guy for the DOS or pay him for the actual remote code execution, even though he didn't provide it and you had to deduce it later? That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
What patch? Yeah.
So what if it's logic subversion and not like a code ball?
Like logic not code?
Using APIs instead of.
So its functioning is designed and approved, but it allows people to do things unexpected. So it's not like they use exact, right? It allows people to run arbitrary code.
I work with a guy who calls that robust code, and there's an additional feature that wasn't planned. Is that what you mean?
No, it may actually be a feature that was planned, but
it's a logic flaw that causes it becomes a scale.
It's not a vulnerability, it's a feature.
I'm not sure about that. What about weak security foundations? So some of these companies that I've seen are built the foundation of security, like they don't patch the web servers and all this stuff. I mean, my personal opinion, being in security for a long time, computers and software are so complicated. There's so many lines of code. It's a miracle that this stuff even works, right? And they're so buggy. People are just pushing stuff out. Like this whole thing is like crazy. It works. What about unclear policies and process, right? So one of the issues that came up a bunch when I was doing this was CAPTCHA. We got a bug. As soon as we submitted one CAPTCHA bug, this is a good story. The crowd, right, submitted CAPTCHA bugs for every login page, regardless of what it was. And then you have to say, from the company's perspective, do you require a CAPTCHA on every login? Some logins aren't as important as others, right? I think CAPTCHA was kind of an interesting aspect. But what about the other security policies, right? Because maybe for a site that you think is less critical, it doesn't have to have the same amount of security controls. But then do you have to tell all of the researchers that, hey, for these sites, they're not as important, so we're not going to pay for that kind of stuff, right? And the company may not even know because they haven't actually had to deal with it, and then they have to decide, right? And that could deal with a lot of different groups, right? Have you had problems with that? Where issues come up and you're like, that's your committee, right?
Our policies and procedures are really clear, and the other advantage for us is that when someone reports a vulnerability, we're automatically adding the bug and sealing the process.
That's good.
So the reporter always sees what we're doing, what we're talking about, and what we're involved in the process.
So the other problem is that hackers cheat, right?
No.
Yeah, so I mean, you can just imagine how that goes, right? And there's a lot of different ways to game these systems, right? You're going to get paid for something. Why not hack that whole process, that whole system, right? It's kind of interesting, kind of fun to think about, right? So let's look at the bounty hunters now, right? That's kind of from the companies, the good things, the bad things. But what about the people that are doing it? So I talked to a bunch of these guys, right? This guy, Night Ranger, pretty cool guy, right? So I was like, tell me about it. What do you think? Why do you do this? He's like, I want to help secure things that I, services I use. I want to improve my skills. I want to get credit, right? And also I want to get, of course, payment for a job. Like, okay, I get that, right? So I talked to this other guy, AJ. He said it enhances his logical bug finding, creativity, and approach, right? And it motivates him. He can spend whatever time he wants hacking anything, knowing he's not going to get sued. It's open to do it, and he can look at all these different, PayPal, Google, Facebook, all these sites, right? All right, Night Ranger again. He said, first of all, it's a challenge, acknowledgement, and then hard work and getting rewarded for doing it. It's all pretty, makes sense, right? So I found 3 common themes for the bug bounty guys, right? First of all, recognition, right? Prestige, right? They want to have their name on an advisory that they release saying, oh, I did this badass hack, Google agreed, and I got paid. Here are the details, right? It's a big thing, right? Especially in the security industry, people want to know that, you're legit, you're at this school, you did this hack. And it's that's the nice thing about the bug bounty programs is they allow you to disclose that, and it's not like just posting something to full disclosure, right? Do you guys allow public disclosure of the Mozilla stuff? After it's fixed.
Well, so yeah, what happens is the advisory goes out, the advisory is attached to the bug becomes public for anyone to read. Open source code.
No, it isn't. All right, so they're a little different. What about you guys?
Yeah, they're not allowed to report it until after.
Well, they can still report.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's pretty standard for everyone, right? Well, except for you guys, because right? They got it first. And so
Mozilla doesn't hide security.
We hide security bugs until they're fixed and released. Once the advisory goes out, and what we do is we watch our ADUs, our average daily user rate. Once it hits a certain level, that we really know people's patch, and we move the flag on the bug and the whole world can read it.
Okay, so it.
all right, practice makes perfect, right? These guys will get experience. The more testing they can do, the better it gets, right? Also, cash. These guys will get paid. It's a little side money here and there. Right? A lot of the people are pen testers. A lot of them are just IT guys. It's great, right? What do you think the #1 reason is? Money, fame, or experience?
Not fame so much as gratitude.
Fame? You think so?
I think it's fame.
One request we always get, something we're building is
It's on the Hall of Fame.
We don't have a Hall of Fame yet. They're like, well, I got a Hall of Fame. Like, we don't have one yet.
There's 4 problems there, right? There's no visibility except for the Mozilla program. There's no visibility of what happens to your bug. You submit it, you send the email, whatever, you submit the form, you don't know what's happening. Did they look at the bug? Did they review it? Is it, who knows, right? Eventually you may get an email, right? The terms can change at any time, is how these programs are set up. Yeah.
So, I started Microsoft founding programs, and I can tell you that we will have visibility.
All right, Microsoft, shot.
Oh, yes, I will definitely take that.
Visibility.
Yes.
Ooh.
We will have visibility. Honestly, I think I might have frightened the lawyers into submission, and I haven't cut too many lawyerish things out of the initial rules. Hold on.
Free for all, Microsoft, get it. The lawyers are out.
And what happened was, thank you. What happened was we had the lawyers cut out too many things, so we are currently waiting for permission from the bounty recipients to publish their names and bounty amounts. Because I just basically said to the lawyers, like, cut. Can we cut that clause? And in retrospect, we probably would put it back in, like as soon as you submit a bounty goal, vulnerability test, that you would be able to publish your name and your bounty amount.
That's great.
So, lesson learned, but we've only been 3 months in the program, so anyway.
There you go.
Give it a shot.
Microsoft. All right. So, terms can change at any time. I don't really see any issues with this, but they all generally have this disclaimer that they can change. The other thing, my perspective, is from the bug bounty hunter side, it's not a very efficient use of time. Because you can have a lot of other people that are banging on the same shit that's already been tested by tons of people and maybe hasn't changed at all. So you're kind of wasting your time. But it's kind of counter to the continuous testing, and there's different sides, right? Also, like I said before, the fixes take time. So you submit the bug, you can't talk about it, and you generally can't get paid until it's fixed. Well, that's not your schedule. That's the developer's schedule, and that's the product manager or whoever's in charge of that development team. So that kind of sucks, right? So let's get through a couple interesting things in the news. I have 3 good ones. So this one I like a lot because it's a PayPal. The search page, the search functionality on PayPal had a cross-site scripting vulnerability. A very simple one. Okay, who has a cross-site scripting vulnerability on a search page, right? Of a major site. This is kind of embarrassing, right? The best part is it was submitted by a 17-year-old kid, right? So this guy gets this email, right? Okay, you must not be less than 18 years of age. PayPal is disqualifying anyone under 18, right? Anybody hear about this? Made a lot of news, right? There's big people freaking out. So what do? Let's do a full disclosure, right? Okay, I'm 17, these guys don't take it, right? Here it is, right? So then they come back and say, cool, if you're 14 and older with your parents' account, you're in, right? So the next one, yes. Does Microsoft have an age limit?
So we do ask that they be 14 or older, but they can designate a parent or legal guardian. We will not deny payment to the children. Absolutely, the children.
Microsoft, all right, so here's a really interesting one, and I'm not going to go into the details about it, but you can look it up. This guy, Nir Goldschlager, who's this crazy Israeli hacker guy who loves OAuth, right? So basically how this works, and here's the steps, right? You utilize Facebook.com subdomain to bypass this OAuth regex, right? They put in some control about the redirection regex. Then you use this crazy redirection thing with multiple hashes, right? Like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Then there was some restriction on another page that did this OAuth redirection. He figured out adding 5 bytes got past that, right? Then you redirect the user to the end page to actually pull off the attack, right? So here's the complete Rubik's Cube, and this is like the actual one-click attack that steals someone's OAuth creds, right? That kind of shit is crazy, and that came out of the bug bounty program, right? And I don't know if they would get that from a pen test, right? So I think that's a good example of like a really hardcore vuln that came out, and I think that's proof that this stuff works, right? It's not process scripting or whatever. So then there's this other vuln, right? Here's another example, right? You can post to any user's wall on Facebook. Sweet, that sounds great, right? Oh, maybe not, right? It's dead denied, right? Lack of technical detail, also the language barrier. So what do? You get a full disclosure, right? No, you post it to Zuckerberg's wall. Because, first, sorry for breaking your privacy and posting your wall. I've been trying to submit this to security, they don't care, right? So then he gets this email, right? Now they don't pay you because you breached term of services, because you actually attacked one of our users, Mark, right? So then, I love this part. We hope you continue working this in the future. Yeah.
That's not actually why. The first bug that he sent in, he exploited another user to demonstrate it.
All right.
But it was also all the other things.
Yeah, you're distracting from the point, though. It doesn't matter.
It's still a good story.
I mean, if he didn't get the first one, he would have gotten it from Zuckerberg's post, right? So it's all good. All right, so then this guy, this is him, he obviously didn't get any money. Somebody started this GoFundMe, and he raised $13,000 they gave him. It's kind of like Kickstarter. Yeah.
I actually think that's a super important point. If he had gone straight to Zuckerberg, Zuckerberg would have had the authority to let him get paid But because he went and exploited a different user on the Facebook platform, the Facebook organization could not authorize paying somebody
So that
for
person's talking,
exploiting
you can always
it.
do it at any point.
No. If you think about it, like, how many users are on Facebook? A billion, half a billion, whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. If Facebook were to send the message that it's okay to hack any of our users and we'll pay you a bounty, that's a very different message from, okay, you proved a point with our CEO and he has the power to grant you clemency and review the bug.
All right, I
So
agree.
it is different. All right, Jesus, I'm getting another shot for this. This is punishment.
That's a reward.
All right.
Okay.
And the question is, why couldn't you just create another account for his own use?
Yeah, a lot of questions. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers. This is what this guy did. He did an interview with CNN. He said, you know what, I can sell this black hat. Well, you know, I'm a good guy, blah, 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 right? And they did this Kickstarter-like thing and paid him, right? So then it raises the question, you gotta think like, well, what about all the people that aren't a good guy like him? Where does that come? I don't know. So let's look at these stats, right? And I've talked to several people here before, but there's definitely clearly a different group of the people that participated in bug bounty programs than the people that don't. And the people that don't give a shit if there's a bug bounty program or not, because they're not going to change how they interact with. They're not going to report it anyway. So what does it matter, right? They're always on. So let's look at some stats, because I find this very interesting. All right, check it out. 44% of all bugs are the first and only bugs submitted by a researcher. Maybe they suck at getting back to people. Maybe people just do a quick one while they're looking at something. I don't really know what that means, but it's a statistic, so take it as you want. 80% of the submissions by researchers submit less than 10 bugs, which is crazy to me. To think that so many of the people that submit bugs only submit like 1 or 2. 10% of the researchers submit 25 bugs or more. So what that means is that all these bug bounty people, there's a very small group that are literally doing this as their full-time job, right?
There's a whole group of people that write fuzzers and they work on finding bugs with fuzzers and they submit. Because a lot of the other bug bounty guys are using hand methods. The guys who build and write fuzzers find way more bugs than
Maya Bos or whatever his tag is. I don't know when he goes by, but he's like all over the Chrome Hall of Fame. I think he does some Mozilla submissions
There's a
too.
Chromium guy who
Yeah,
does a
yeah.
lot of bugs.
And he just writes every once in a while he comes out with a new edition.
There's actually
of his
guys at
fuzzer.
Google who uses Google's infrastructure to run a fuzzer against Mozilla. to find bounty bugs.
Yeah,
But the deal with
That's
Google is
awesome.
that all the money he makes goes to charity. So
yeah.
we give him a bounty, but all the bounty money goes to charity.
That's good. All right, so Google's paid out over $1 million. This is the best program. Is it 2?
Yeah,
Is that wrong?
Just did last month.
Yeah, it was recent.
Over the lifetime?
I thought that was Chromium. Is that wrong? That's for the web?
So Google overall.
All right.
Is that lifetime or just this year?
Lifetime.
It's like a lifetime program.
I don't.
I wanted to give you Microsoft stats for one hit wonders.
Let's hear it.
Over
I
75%.
need to talk for that.
Oh, no, God.
Oh, take it.
It's not this is a sipping drink.
She can open source her shop.
The bourbon is sipping.
All right, well, I only have a few minutes. You better make quick. Let's
All
get
right.
some stats. Here's
The
yours.
stat is that one hit wonders, as in one bug reported to Microsoft, over 75% of our finders were one hit wonders. FYI.
That lines up very well with my stats, so you added credibility to me.
Correct.
That's nice. Facebook has paid $1 million in the last 2 years. There's a recent stat. This is another Facebook stat. So 329 bounty hunters have made at least $500, right? Which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's kind of pretty good. Google's, as the majority is interesting in cross-site scripting. It's kind of like, whatever. So the question is, does it work? Do these programs work? Right? I find this very interesting. Google said they're finding less. They just raised the bounty amount, right? And they've continued to raise it, which to me means it's actually working, right? You keep raising the amount, not because you're getting tons and tons of submissions, because you're getting less and less. And you want to encourage people to find more, right? One of the bug hunters said it was harder to find. So I think it's changing testing.
I know internally for our group, it's really taken us to take a step back, look at our direction, and build.
Cheers to that. You get a shot for reevaluating your security approach. What's the company? What's the website so we can hack into it later?
What's that?
What's the website we can hack into later?
Gift cards.
Giftcards.com. All right, get on it. So here's some free advice.
We haven't implemented the new change.
So here's some free advice from the bug hunters right there. All right, be prepared to run such a program. Have the professional manpower to deal with the bug submissions and understand them. Because honestly, when you start one of these programs, you may get slammed with stuff, right? And you want to be able to do that. And these guys submit bugs and they get screwed because people don't know how to understand them. They don't respond fast. Have proper verification, timely reply. Same theme, right? So the question is, what's the future, right? Where does this go? We have the Bug Crowd team here, which is a small startup from Australia that just raised a bunch of money and will be throwing a party, free drinks later tonight. And they have a crowdsourced bug bounty program. So instead of a company having it, they run it for companies. And what's the party detail so we can learn more?
It's the Derby kickoff party in the ballroom, so we're sponsoring the bar. So.
Awesome.
That's why I need some money, right? You guys find out something, right? Not bounties. So my advice is, right, submit some bugs, accept some bugs, provide some rewards, and get yourself secure, right? And that's it. Thank you, guys.